welcome to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. Coming up on today's show, Britain's best-kept political secret has finally been revealed as Lord David Cameron, the former Conservative winning Prime Minister, is back in government, only this time not as leader, but as the UK's new and possibly overqualified Foreign Secretary. Will Rishi Sunak's Downing Street gamble pay off? Our business correspondent Simon Pusey will shortly be joining me with all of the fallout. And Britain's Supreme Court has ruled that the government's plans to send migrants to Rwanda is unlawful due to a real risk of maltreatment. In response, the Prime Minister said he remains hopeful of flights starting in the spring if he is able to draft emergency legislation. Immigration solicitor Dr. Jennifer Obaseki will be joining me from here in the capital for an update on this developing story. Then later, I was in Riyadh last week covering Nigeria's participation at a series of socio-economic and geopolitical events led by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. His Excellency's official visit to Saudi appeared to be a success, and I, of course, will be sharing my exclusive interviews with you. But first, 3 days after his appointment as Foreign Secretary, Lord David Cameron arrived in Ukraine this week to meet with President Volodymyr Zelensky. According to an official statement from the President's office, talks between the two leaders centred around defence. Lord Cameron was appointed Foreign Secretary on Monday in a surprise move by Rishi Sunak. It is understood that this will allow the Prime Minister to focus on domestic affairs while two wars rage in Ukraine and the Middle East. Monday's cabinet reshuffle also saw a less surprising update, the ousting of Suella Braverman, who was sacked after publishing an article in The Times accusing the Metropolitan Police of bias. In the wake of the sacking, the former Home Secretary wrote a brutal open letter to the Prime Minister, accusing him of betrayal, duplicity and weakness. He is, she suggests, unfit to govern Britain.
Well, I know it's not usual for a Prime Minister to come back in this way, but I believe in public service. The Prime Minister asked me to do this job, and it's a time where we have some daunting challenges as a country, the conflict in the Middle East, the war in Ukraine. And, of course, I hope that 6 years as Prime Minister, 11 years leading the Conservative Party gives me some useful experience and contacts and relationships and knowledge that I can help the Prime Minister to make sure we build our alliances, we build partnerships with our friends, we deter our enemies, and we keep our country strong. That's why I'm doing the job, and I'm delighted to accept. On the whole, as an ex-Prime Minister, I've tried to keep quiet about politics, stay out of politics. It's hard enough being Prime Minister without having your predecessors endlessly giving a running commentary. But look, of course, I've disagreed with some individual decisions, but politics is a team enterprise. I've decided to join this team because I believe Rishi Sunak is a good Prime Minister doing a difficult job at a hard time. I want to support him. I'm a member of the team, and I accept the Cabinet collective responsibility that comes with that.
Well, for more on this, I was earlier joined in the studio by our business correspondent, Simon Pusey. Simon, I think even the strongest political hacks in your phone book were caught unawares on Monday when we saw now Lord David Cameron walking into number 10. So much has happened since then. I suppose we should start with the first big story on Monday. Can you assess Lord Cameron's emergence after a 7-year political absence?
Yeah, it's been a crazy few days, even in British politics, in terms of that. I think Suella Braverman leaving her role was not unexpected. She'd been causing a lot of trouble, people saying she's positioning herself against Rishi Sunak for any future leadership bid. So it's more of a matter of when than if, exactly. But David Cameron, I think, depends which side, how right-wing or where in the political spectrum you are in the Conservative Party, was quite a good move, or could turn out to be quite a good move from David Cameron, because it took away the spotlight from Suella Braverman and her leaving.
True.
And it suddenly shone a big light on this, which no one was expecting, and that's actually quite impressive in terms of how leaky government can be, that they kept that secret for a long time because everyone took a big, intake of breath when they saw David Cameron stepping out of the car. It also gives a bit of gravitas to the government. Rishi Sunak trying to come across as being the grown-up and being a serious politician that's trying to put the UK back on track after a couple of years of pretty much chaos for the Conservative Party. So bringing back David Cameron, who obviously was leader for 6 years, was Prime Minister, for 6 years, is an interesting move, and it's one that he hasn't had the most success in terms of foreign policy while he was Prime Minister, but he has obviously a lot of contacts. He's well respected across the political world.
Yeah. And he's a centrist, isn't he?
And he's a centrist, and I think that's what Rishi Sunak is trying to do as well, because he made a deal with the devil, some people would say, with Suella Braverman when he took the job to try and keep the right of the party happy. Yeah. That hasn't worked out. She's been a constant thorn in his side. So basically replacing her, although it's not a like-for-like job, bringing David Cameron in, who is much more centrist, of course, it will appeal to a lot of voters who I think had kind of started to leave the Conservative Party, drift towards Labour, is those centrist voters who voted for David Cameron, George Osborne, maybe even voted for Boris Johnson, but since then have been just losing kind of their identity with the Conservative Party. What it won't do, of course, is the more right-wing side of the party are furious about this.
They're gathering, aren't they?
They are, but this is always going to be the problem. So it's a gamble. Who knows if it'll pay off? Suella Braverman, I don't think it was unexpected that she wrote that letter saying that he hadn't hit any of his key pledges and that he was a weak Prime Minister. But we know what she's thinking, right? She's thinking there's going to be a leadership election, there's going to be a leadership challenge, and she's going to be the front runner for that when that happens. So I don't think it's really going to necessarily change too much in terms of the polling, in terms of a future general election. But it should make Rishi Sunak's life a little bit easier now, because if you look at other people who have lost their cabinet jobs, sometimes if you think of the former Home Secretary, Priti Patel, she was very critical as well, but you now don't really hear from her on the backbenches. They don't have the same kind of profile. So I guess that's what he's hoping will happen with Suella Braverman. But what an interesting sort of couple of days we've had.
I know, unprecedented, shocking. I think we're going to have to keep those as permanent terms. Just very briefly, I did watch Rishi Sunak at Prime Minister's Questions. Obviously, we know he is a man on top of his brief. He did look a little bit frazzled. I know, of course, they just had the Supreme Court ruling, so perhaps that took him unawares, although I'm sure he was briefed on that outcome, perhaps. But is he frightened by Suella? I know you said that, of course, she is going to be in the backbenches, but he has lost that right-wing appeal, hasn't he?
Yeah, and it's, like we've said so many times before, keeping this Conservative Party together seems to be an absolutely impossible task. You've got so many different factions within it, and they've been in power for so long, and when that happens, people start to, you need to have a period of time in opposition, really, regather, refocus, re-identify where you are. But at the moment, there's so many different factions within the Conservative Party. I think Rishi Sunak has always been a little bit more centrist, and he was trying to appeal to the right wing of the party because he knew that was, that was a big part of it. But years ago, UKIP was. A lot of people sort of went to UKIP, voted for UKIP because there was that right-wing need.
Got an MP, didn't they?
Exactly. And now there isn't really UKIP. There is Reform UK, which is growing a lot, but the Conservative Party has broadened into this sort of much more right-wing side of things, and I think it's really hard to keep that together. So I think, I'd understand that Rishi Sunak is frazzled because there was a lot that had just happened, right?
Yeah.
A big sort of cabinet reshuffle, bringing back a former Prime Minister. Another thing with that is that Suella Braverman's accusing him of being weak, but to bring back someone who was pretty popular within the Conservative Party, pretty successful, and for him to be under you, that's quite a big move.
It is.
And I think that does show that he's, I don't think it shows weakness, really. I think it shows...
He means business.
I think it shows that, yeah, exactly. He wants to... He doesn't think the next election's a foregone conclusion. I think we do, and a lot of people do, but I think he still thinks that they've got a chance to maybe not outright win it, but, not make it easy for Labour. So it'll be interesting to see what role David Cameron plays, if he plays according to the script and sticks to, Conservative Party line, because he's been critical of Rishi Sunak and a number of things, HS2, of course. Yes. So it'll be interesting to see how that dynamic works out. But I don't know if bringing him back shows weakness like Suella Braverman is accusing. Yeah,
gosh, you've got to be in it to win it. And Rishi is certainly a man about his business. Thank you so much, Simon. Let's see what secret pops out next week.
Thank you.
Staying with British news, the Prime Minister has said he is prepared to do whatever is necessary after the Supreme Court ruled that the government's plans to send migrants to Rwanda was unlawful. Rishi Sunak said he would bring forward a new treaty to address the Supreme Court's concerns, along with new legislation to formally designate Rwanda a safe country. Well, in response to the ruling, Yolande Makolo, the Rwandan government spokesperson, said, "While this was ultimately a decision for the UK's judicial system, we take issue with the ruling that Rwanda is not a safe country for asylum seekers and refugees. Given Rwanda's welcoming policy and our record of caring for refugees, the political judgments made today were unjustified. The examples raised in court to support the ruling were insensitive to violations of international humanitarian law ongoing in many parts of the world. The court relied on extreme and speculative concerns based on the hypocritical criticisms of the UNHCR, which has on numerous occasions expressed its appreciation of Rwanda's inclusive refugee policies, qualifying them as exemplary. Rwanda will now focus on working with the UK on a binding treaty to re-emphasise already existing guarantees required for the partnership to succeed. The 5-year trial, announced in April 2022, would have seen anyone entering the UK illegally sent to Rwanda to claim asylum there. Well, for more on this, I'm now being joined by immigration solicitor Dr. Jennifer Obaseki. Dr. Jennifer joins me from here in the British capital. Dr. Jennifer Obaseki, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. You are a very busy woman, so I also always appreciate your time on Channels Business Global. We thought Lord David Cameron's emergence after a 7-year political exile would be the big story of the week, but it's actually been overshadowed because, of course, the Supreme Court on Tuesday blocked the Rwanda deportation ban. We've discussed this quite extensively over the past year. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts are, we could have said, I told you so. We knew that it was not going to be a fair decision if it was to be allowed, because it was the Home Office essentially appealing, the government was appealing. The lower courts had already outlined that it was not the right decision to want to remove asylum seekers, people seeking refuge to another country, especially a country that did in itself not have a good track record. So I'm in agreement with it, that the court made the right decision.
It's quite interesting, isn't it? Because, of course, Suella Braverman, it wasn't her scheme, it was her predecessor scheme, Priti Patel. And I think in some certain sectors of the country, Suella Braverman and the Rwanda scheme actually had a lot of support. But then if you look at the polling, most people agreed with the Prime Minister that she should be sacked, which means, therefore, that most people in this country don't actually believe in the Rwanda scheme, and that people in this country do genuinely want to help people that are fleeing violence or other issues. You've been doing this job for several years now. Are you finding that some of your clients are a little hesitant, are a little fearful now of applying for a visa in this country because of some of the rhetoric that we did hear from Suella Braverman and, of course, because of the Rwanda scheme?
No, we've had a hostile environment towards immigration and migrants for some time, but there is no dissuasion because of the fear of being removed from the UK. The UK is a destination of choice for people coming willingly and people who are fleeing. We say, well, the public, in relation to the responses to the suggestion of the scheme, some support, but many don't. Many think that it's rather unreasonable to want to treat people who are already in distress and vulnerable in that way. Don't get me wrong. The government has said that their reason for doing this is to stop the small boats. We don't want to see people dying. We don't want to see traffickers taking advantage of vulnerable people, but we have to have a fair and reasonable and accessible immigration policy.
To Jennifer Obaseki, who of course is a solicitor and the founder of Obaseki Solicitors, which is the UK's leading immigration law firm in the UK. Thank you so much for joining me on the show and taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you're very busy. Thank you, Doctor.
Anytime. Have a great day.
Last week, a large cohort of executive governors, honourable ministers and captains of industry joined His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu for an official visit to Riyadh to participate in a series of economic and diplomatic talks with their Saudi counterparts. Channels Television was, of course, on ground to capture all of the behind-the-scenes activity. And we start with an exclusive sit-down I had with the Minister for Industry, Trade and Investment, Ms. Doris Uzoka Inite, who spoke with me just a few hours after co-hosting the Saudi-Nigeria roundtable meeting. Are investors still a bit risk-averse to Nigeria?
You're right, actually. You're right, Juliana, about the brand Nigeria being a big issue. It is. We inherited a weak economy. We inherited an economy with a lot of insecurity, poor economic growth. We don't want to go into that. But what we inherited is also an opportunity. It's a huge opportunity for us to change the narrative. If the opportunity wasn't there, maybe this president would not have been elected. He was elected because people have confidence in his ability to change the narrative. We've seen him do that with Lagos State. We've seen him do that with a number of the businesses that he has touched and a number of individuals that he has touched. And he has come out boldly to say, I know, it was give me your mandate and watch me do my magic. We believe in the magic of Tinubu, the Bola magic. And the brand Nigeria thing, it's going to take a while, but I can assure you that rebranding the country is our main objective, our main focus. It's one thing to advertise and, make nice commercials and nice TV series and documentaries and say, oh, Nigeria is good, is that. But I think the most important thing is for people to see the impact of these reforms. When he came in and he started with the petrol subsidy removal and then the FX policy removal, we know the sort of hardship that would cause. But he promised us it was going to be temporary and for a very short time. These policies will take time to manifest, but it's for the best of the country. The foreign investors who understand the impact of these policies are the ones who are now showing and showing their support behind the president and saying to him, we believe in your policy. We know this is for the best of the country and for businesses. When anybody puts their money where their mouth is, that's a sign of strong confidence. Now, this is what they're saying. For us back home, we are looking at the impact of inflation and the currency devaluation on our pockets. I understand that. But I want everyone to take confidence in the confidence that is being reposed in the government by the investors that have the money, that have the fund. Like I said earlier, investment is cowardly. And when you see an investor who is coming strongly into an area, then you know that there is something there. They always say follow the money. So follow the investors, especially savvy investors like the Saudi Arabian investors. You listen to them today. Brilliant people. We've listened to all the other investors I met in the US, the ones I also met in India. Brilliant people. Businessmen know about economics more than anybody else, more than even government. They invest in it, they have a huge team giving them research, information and all of that. I just want to encourage everyone back home to support the president. It's going to take a little time, not too long, but they're going to feel the impact of these reforms positively in their social welfare. And we're committed to it. We're relentless about making the country work again. And the rebranding Nigeria starts with us. It starts with what we say and what we do. And we're going to do the right things to make the country work and to give us the right impression that we have. And all of the issues that we see about a couple of maybe bad behaviors, you hear, oh, Nigeria is this, Nigeria, they will all change. China had a bad impression too in the beginning of the 20th century. But now the economy is doing well, that's changed. India the same. A lot of Taiwan, the same. I remember then when you were going to buy made in China, made in Taiwan, I said, no, don't touch it, it's fake, it's cheap. But now, it's changed. And it's going to be the same story with Nigeria. We have a huge opportunity to make it work. And everybody must work together, collectively, with the same singular hope, singular belief, singular faith in the country that we have. I believe in the country. I believe in the huge opportunities, the potentials. We work together and make it work. The only thing I can assure you from the government side is that I will support every policy that favors the growth of MSMEs, the growth of businesses, that creates a fair playing ground for all businesses to thrive. And that is the mandate given to me by His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu.
An example of South-South partnership, and it's an example of the type of cooperation that we need around the world in order to help each other, partner with each other. And in this particular case, clearly between the Arab world and between Africa is about 18% of the world's population, 1.5 billion people. So if they come together and cooperate, definitely that kind of market has tremendous opportunity. Not least of all, the Arab world is blessed with riches, and they are looking to invest. They're looking for long-term investment opportunities that will help them to keep earning and keep having funding even when oil revenues dwindle. And on that basis, Africa, and Nigeria in particular, is a veritable home for such investment funds. We have the natural resources that can be invested in. We have the solid minerals. We have infrastructure opportunities, as well, of course, as manufacturing and processing. And these are areas that are of interest to the Arab world. And so we are here to tell them that Nigeria, under President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, is open for business.
If you think about what has happened to Saudi Arabia, the characteristics of our nations are similar. Both mono economies. Saudi Arabia, 99% of its foreign exchange is from oil. Nigeria, 89–90%. The only differences are we've got a larger population. They're 33–34 million. We're over 200 million. But the reality is we've got a lot in common. Religion is one, Islam. Saudi Arabia, Mecca is a very, very important pillar in Islam. And that relationship has been bilateral, that's been there for over 60, 70 years. And being a very important pillar in Islam that every Muslim must visit for the pilgrimage at least once in a lifetime, that shows that symbiotic relationship. But stepping out of that, Saudi Arabia over the last 7 to 10 years has shown what you could do with capital in investing in huge infrastructure that buttresses and pushes out development for a nation state. And this is the type of example that Nigeria needs to follow, the path Nigeria needs to follow, to make sure we could show and shine our development opportunities to the world, to attract the important foreign direct investment that will help spur the growth Mr. President is leading the charge on.
Well, sadly, that's all we have time for today. But as always, do get in touch with your comments and suggestions. I'll see you at the same time next week for more in-depth business analysis on Channel's Business Global. Goodbye.